Good morning and welcome to our first quarterly review for the 2022-2023 school year. We're going to start by just looking over some historical data for East Garner. Here's our math historical data going back from 2017 all the way to last year's EOGs from 2021-22. When looking at these scores, something you might want to keep in mind is looking at the cohorts of students, which means looking diagonally across to see where our third grade students, when they move to the next grade level, did in the following year. Last year, our third grade students were at 48.6% proficient, our fourth grade students were at 28.4% proficient, and our fifth grade students were at 43.2% proficient. In ELA, for last year's data in particular, our third graders were at 34.7%. Our fourth graders were at 31.5%, and our fifth graders were at 32.5%. Here is our historical data for science. So last year we were at 49.3%. And here's our third grade BOG, or beginning of grade test, that's administered at the beginning of each third grade year. So last year, we were at 7.5% of our students were proficient on our BOG. So now we're going to move into this year's data. So our beginning of the grade test this year, so this is an equivalent to an EOG given to our third grade students to see at the beginning of the year if they're proficient. It's one of their read to achieve good cause exemptions to move them forward to fourth grade. And as of this point, 6.25% of our students were proficient on the BOG. This is our BOYM class composite data. So if we're looking down at the bottom at the visual, you'll notice that there are a lot of students for third grade. We need to make sure that we keep in mind that a percentage of those third grade students are actually fourth grade students who are reading retained in our system. So they are fourth graders who are actually taking our third grade M class assessment. So on the top in the chart, it's breaking up a little better. So if we look at kindergarten, we started our year with 22% proficient, 20% strategic, and 58% intensive. First grade, 40% proficient, 15% strategic, and 45% intensive. In second grade, we have 50% proficient, 19% strategic, and 31% intensive. Third grade, we have 36% proficient, 24% strategic, 41% intensive. When we get to our fourth grade RTA, just a reminder that these are fourth grade students, and this is their proficiency on the third grade assessment. So even though we have 56% proficient, that means they are proficient at the beginning of the year, third grade level, so they are still a year behind. When we go into our fourth grade category, these are students that do not fall into our read to achieve category. So these are all students that either had passed the previous year, the EOG, BOG, an M-class Lexile, or a read to achieve assessment. And then lastly, our fifth grade, we're at 47% proficient, 25% strategic, and 28% intensive. Our watch list data is in the process of being compiled and should be ready by the end of this week to start sharing with grade levels and teams. For our NKT data, our kindergarten students were 44% proficient, 27% fell into the strategic, and 29% fell into the intensive. In first grade, 49% met or exceeded the proficiency. 16% were strategic, and 35% were intensive. And lastly, our second graders, we had 61% who met and were proficient, 9% strategic, and 30% intensive. When we move on to our 3-5-star math, the coloring is a little different, so keep that in mind. Our yellows are actually intensive, our blues are supplemental, and our greens are proficient or exceeding that proficiency. So in third grade, 41% was proficient, 14% was supplemental, 46% in the intensive. In fourth grade, 40% was proficient, 5% supplemental, and 55% intensive. And in fifth grade, we had 36% proficient, 19% supplemental, and 46% intensive. When looking at some of our Dreambox data, we looked specifically at September. If we look at the first chart there, we'll see our usage percentages. And in August, it was kind of skewed because it says there's 734 students, which we do not have, but it was not taken into consideration. Last year's students, they were kind of doubling up on that. So the most accurate data was our September's with our 466. During that time, we had 56% of our students school-wide that were doing 5 or more lessons in Dreambox. We had 30% of our students that were between 2 and 5 lessons in Dreambox. We had 11% of our students that were following in the 1 to 2 lessons per week in Dreambox, and then 3% of the students that were not completing the lessons in Dreambox. We have to take into consideration those might have been new students moving in, and also our ECS students are in these rostered as 3rd graders, 4th graders, 5th graders who may not be accessing the Dreambox at this time. In the middle is our prediction for grade. So you can look per grade level, and just remember that our predictions are based off of cumulative play and demonstrated proficiency since the start of the school year. So they may be on it a lot, but it's proficiency in those standards. Okay, these predictions assume students continue their current play behavior and trajectory. So we need to make sure that they're continuing to do that, and even do more so to be able to make gains in those areas and make those not on track areas and potentially on track areas smaller. And last, our last category there is our distribution per grade for usage. So you'll just see where each grade level is for their usage. Like I had said before, some grade levels might not be at 100% due to new students moving in as well as ECS students being on those rosters.